Hi, I'm Mark, and I'm going to share about anxiety and shame and how it has affected my life, also how I worked through it. I've been through many devastating situations in my own journey, and I hope that I can help you through your journey as well. So, this is my story.
Welcome to the Fair Business Australia podcast. Future-proof your business, impact your community. I'm your host, Rebecca Lloyd. Welcome, Fair Business Australians, to another episode of the Fair Business Australia podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Lloyd. Joining me today is a gentleman that I've recently met. I went to a conference. I loved what he had to say. I said, Mr. Johnston, you must come and speak to my audience. Mark, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I will let the introductions be left up to you. Tell our audience, my audience, who is Mark Johnston? What was I at your conference for? And I think we'll then meander from there and see how we go today.
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. My name is Mark Johnston, and what am I about? I'm about change, I'm about truth, I'm about healing, restoration, and I want to see people's lives change for the better. So that's pretty much who I am as a person. I love people. I love seeing people find freedom, and I love seeing people move forward. And the shame course the other day was predominantly about understanding first and foremost what shame is and what shame is not. So shame is quite devastating for a lot of people. They don't even realize that they feel like a leper in their own skin. They feel guilty for no good reason, and they don't feel at home in their heart. So pretty much that's what I taught about and how to work through that effectively.
So good, Mark. So I was at a conference for shame. I was a little bit nervous. One of my friends invited me. I was thinking, am I going to get triggered? Because that has been a lifelong battle with shame. You may not know that, but it's true. So I went to the conference. Thankfully, I wasn't triggered at all. I've already done a lot of work in the past. There's still some finessing, but that's okay. So, Mark, I was really drawn to what you had to say because you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You've had some challenges and you have had to dig out of the dirt everything that you know about. So, we don't want to show everyone what we had for breakfast because that wouldn't be inappropriate for this platform. But why don't you tell us a little bit about, where did Mark Johnston come from, siblings, family life, and why did you feel like you ended up in such a position with shame that you made some choices that you may have made differently if you hadn't have been battling with that?
Yeah, so I'm from the outback of Australia. My family predominantly are alcoholics. They were drug addicts. I come from a broken family, so my father didn't want anything to do with me. And my mother had children out of wedlock, which that's normal for the outback with a lot of people. And so I've got a sister to a different father, and I've got a brother to another father, and I've got a sister from the same father. So there were a lot of mixed messages. So a lot of my upbringing was around pubs, bars, rivers, backyards, parties. And so there was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of abandonment. There was a lot of questions. I didn't have any answers. And funnily enough, no one had the answers to give me. So I was left with this barrage of emotional pain, and I didn't know how to process it. And a part of that process took me into bad maladaptive behaviors and even interactions with other people. I was so riddled with humiliation and embarrassment. My stepfather used to violently bash my mother. So publicly, I would be out on the street. People would see what was going on behind closed doors. And so I was always embarrassed at school, didn't have lunch, didn't have the normal necessities that other children had. So I didn't know at the time that that was shame. But anyway, that's just a couple of scenarios that really, I suppose, done something in me that I couldn't undo.
I think as a society, we're quite good at looking at things weren't right when I was growing up. And we've started to have that conversation as a society. We've started to have that conversation as a community. What I feel like we don't have conversation around is people who were raised in fairly what you would consider functional households, and they did okay at school and they've got a fairly decent job. And yet we're still seeing this shame and also the anxiety that's coming out. And I feel like the challenge with shame and anxiety is that people always want to point it back to some terrible set of events that happened either in childhood or in teen years. And what do you say to people, Mark, that struggle with shame and struggle with anxiety? They can't kind of put their finger on where it's come from. Maybe it presents that they just don't want to speak in public. Maybe it presents like when something happens in the boardroom, they stay quiet when they know if they spoke up, they would be listened to, they would be able to, progress in their career. So what do you say to people who they're not able to point to, well, I was raised like this and my father did that. How do you handle that as a qualified counsellor?
Well, firstly, one of the major factors that I have when it comes to counselling is a lot of people tell me I don't feel that I'm enough. So the unrealistic expectations that are put upon children to perform actually is a shaming message. Even when I see perfectionists, they're never going to hit that point of perfection. So they beat on themselves, they have the inner critic, they're putting themselves down, they're never good enough, they cannot please their parents. And so, in a sense, and especially in some cultures, there's a sense of shame. Shame on you, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, you should have done this, you should have done that. And so they've got this perpetual sense of failure. And so what child wants to feel that way? They feel like something is not just wrong, something is defective about them. And so it's a real shaming message. And so what happens with anxiety in the sympathetic nervous system, when there's a threat or when there's danger or when there's a sense of uncertainty, it causes anxiety. And so if the mind is constantly having to protect itself, that's why people end up feeling overwhelmed with anxiety. They have dread, they have phobic thinking, and they have a sense that I can't do anything about the things that are out of my control. And so anxiety is a major issue. I've also seen with clients that where there's trauma, from being shamed and not good enough for their family, they actually get so overwhelmed by anxiety they don't feel they can do anything with it, and they go into a despairing state, even to the point of wanting to commit suicide.
Wow. And that's all through unrealistic expectations, whether placed on oneself or placed on you by your family or your community. That's and have you such a big topic, folks. And I know that a lot of people that follow Fair Business Australia are not coping right now, which is why I was so determined to get into Mark's busy schedule and have him come on the podcast today. We know that COVID has really exacerbated, or at least brought to the surface, the I'm not coping statement that we're hearing all over social media nowadays. But how do you bring hope into that situation when someone has those unrealistic expectations or has gone through a global situation where we didn't feel like we were very much in control? So COVID is finished now. We're grown up now. We should be able to do this. We should be able to do that, which comes out of the unrelenting standards and unrealistic expectations. So how do you as a counsellor come in and disrupt that neural pathway so that someone like myself, who has unrelenting standards, who has battled with shame, who has had a less than ideal upbringing with the community that I was in, not my family of origin, how do you come in and actually separate fact from the story that we tell ourselves about what happened and what that must mean that I am as a person?
Yeah, well, I think, life-defining moments really nail that, because what happened at that point and how you were defined at that point, we may need to revisit it, revise it, and then relinquish it. And what do I mean by revisit it? It doesn't mean we live in the past, but it just means that the past has affected us. So to revise it means we re-examine it. At that point when you're a child, your processing capability wasn't at a level where you could actually understand what you were feeling. And then we need to relinquish it. We need to get rid of it. And so I liken it to, imagine if your emotions sat in the driver's seat of the car and steered your mind wherever your emotions wish to go. And most people would tell me, oh, well, I'd drive off a cliff if my emotions sat in the driver's seat. So it's not necessarily about being stuck. It's not necessarily just about COVID. It's more to the point, we don't know what to do with what we feel. And so a lot of what happens with people, they go into what we call emotional directed reasoning. And so if I feel like I'm in danger, then I am in danger. If I don't feel I have hope, then there is no option for me to get out of this. And so what happens is we have this emotional overload and blockage. And because we haven't got the skills, the tools, or we haven't been upskilled or how to deal with it, it actually gets to the point where it's overwhelming and we have a meltdown or we have a blow up or we just want to vacate. So with the counseling model that I do, we're not going to say, oh, we're going to get rid of your emotions straight away. No, we're going to teach you how to downgrade them. Now, isn't that comforting? Downgrade them. So emotions don't pack their bags and go on a holiday for you. Okay, they're here to stay, so we need to know what to do with them. So even the French word émerveiller means to move through. So emotions are meant to move. They're not meant to stay put. They're meant to be processed. And sadly, a lot of people have suppressed what they feel. They've shut off what they feel. And then they end up with what you call catharsis. So catharsis is a medical term where there's an infection, a buildup, and they had to get a needle or to expunge the actual infection out. And that's what happens with emotions. We've got to learn how to process them, how to offload them so we can work through life more effectively.
Wow. Oh, getting a little session here. This is awesome. So, Mark, how do you manage people like myself who are very A-type, very business focused, I don't have time for emotions, and we do suppress? How do you bring someone through where they're willing to at least allow emotions to be in the passenger seat, let alone in the trailer or not even coming on the journey at all?
Yeah, well, I think, burnout doesn't come from hard work. Burnout comes from not taking your inner life seriously. So everyone can get away with performance. Anyone can perform. But what is your performance propped up by? So we have to get to possibly the driving belief, which is my worth and significance is decided by other people. Or the other belief is my worth or value is determined by my performance. See, when we have performance as a defining factor, that's when we're propped up by the wrong things in life. So when we take a check at what's motivating us, what is in us to cause us to be driven, then that's the actual cause of the problem. So as I said, burnout doesn't come from hard work. It comes from emotions and things that we're not processing properly. So I hope that makes sense because it ties down deeply to what you believe. See, my worth and value is not in your hands. And so the day that we realize that it's not in another person's hands, then see, we're not waiting for them to always validate us. There comes a point where what we use at the counseling it's called reassurance. And it means spoken statements that remove your fears and doubts. And so I teach people how to reassure themselves. You've done a good enough job today. It's okay. Rome wasn't built in a day. Don't think that you have to jump to the top of the staircase. Just take one step at a time. It's okay. And so I use reassurances to bring people back to a healthier place of security and contentment so they're not overturning and burning unnecessary energy.
Oh, we'll sit with that for a moment. That was worth the price of the ticket. My goodness. So I love what you're saying, Mark. How does someone who's watching this podcast today, how could they use reassurance themselves? Because I know many people have gone through counseling for many years or whatever that looks like. How can one reassure oneself so that at the end of the day, you're not just eating foods that you shouldn't be eating or drinking too much alcohol or watching too much television because you're just trying to check out because you can't cope?
Well, I think you don't outthink how you feel. You don't use willpower. You use insight. And you need insight because insight is the strengthening factor of your resolve. So it's a coaching of yourself in the truth. See, because your feelings can sometimes lie to you. Sometimes you feel all these different kinds of things and they're telling you a different narrative. But when you take ownership for what you think, what you feel, and what you speak, that's when things begin to shift. For example, someone that's constantly worried about what people think of them. So if I'm concerned about what people are thinking of me before I go into a meeting, I will reassure myself verbally. I'll say, Mark, what they think about you is up to them. What you think about you is more important. You're just as valuable. You're just as loved. You're just as welcomed. You belong here just as much as anyone else. And at the end of the day, you can only do what you can do, and you can do it the best of your ability. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. Life is not perfect. No one is perfect. It's all good. And so I begin to speak those truths on a daily basis sometimes. Or here's another situation. I'm stuck in Harvey Bay, just got married. I made a pretend agreement. I'm going to Harvey Bay. How exciting. Okay, I'll agree to it. And then I got to Harvey Bay and my heart was just so not wanting to be in Harvey Bay. Like I so felt like I didn't belong there. And so why is it a pretend agreement? Because I said yes with my head, but my heart in reality said no. So I remember going for a walk feeling sorry for myself, which sometimes we do, right? And because of the insight that I had learned over the years, I actually realized I was becoming a victim. I was feeling helpless and powerless and poor me and no one understands. And now I'm stuck here. And because I knew what I knew, I spoke and I said, Mark, you're not here forever. You made a decision to come here. It's okay. When it's time to leave, things will happen in good time. And so I remember being down the beach and I'm whinging and I'm complaining through this process. And my wife says to me, she goes, can you just stop with your attitude? I'm overhearing all the negativity about where we're living. So I went back to the drawing board and I got another insight, which is one of the beliefs is I don't belong here.
Oh,
So I went back to the drawing board and I thought, what can I word in such a way that will settle my heart? And so I said, Mark, you're here for now. And when it's time to go, everything will work in its good timing. You're not here forever. You belong here for now until it's time to leave. And I kid you not, my attitudes began to drop off. My heart became more settled. And even to the point when it was time to move out of Harvey Bay 2 years later, I was even contemplating staying in Harvey Bay. See, if you tell yourself you belong here for now until it's time to go, you will settle your heart. So I hope that makes sense. That's what I do in my own life, and that's what I teach my clients.
wow. Oh, so good. I love that it doesn't have to boil down to just self-discipline. Self-discipline, even if you hate it, just do it anyway, which is kind of in the same throes as victim mentality, really. It's just you're actually refusing to even believe like a victim. So you, again, the emotions are in the trailer or not even along for the journey. So using what you've just spoken about with the reassurance, could you potentially give a few tools to the people who are watching online who are saying, I don't feel assured right now. I'm great for you, Mark. I'm really stoked for you. But what about me? And I noticed that you have a cross in the background. You are a man of faith. How
Yeah.
does someone who is maybe just toying with the idea of faith or, has been really burnt in church and so is very anti-faith for probably very good reason, how do you assure yourself when you're not particularly a person of a defined faith at this time?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about misintroduction. If you've had a misintroduction to Jesus, then Jesus is always going to be that religious figmentation. He's going to be that person up on the building. He's going to be that law, duty bound, religious, black and white, person in your life, and especially if people misrepresent him. So it's a misintroduction. And so until we go back and reintroduce who Jesus really is, then our concept of Jesus won't change. Now, if your concept of church is all about money, then you always be put off with, well, that's what it's all about. But it's actually not all about that. That's just the projection of people's being in certain environments that have really just ruffled their feathers. So I would say it's misintroductions. Like for myself, I had a misintroduction to, people in church myself. I mean, I was, like a leper. I was the guy coming from the outside, come from absolute darkness. And I've come to this place where, to me, it felt like a country club. I felt like I was going to the bowling club where, Betty meets Mary and Mary meets Bob and everyone's nice and they're fancy and they're polite. I'm like, but I'm rough and I'm raw and I'm real. And I just felt like a misfit. But Jesus actually makes you feel like you fit. And that's what I love about Jesus. And so that's really where my heart's at is whatever you've been introduced to, maybe you need to look at that again. And so when it comes to even the material that I teach, I go to give scriptural solutions to emotional problems. And so that's where I help people through that process as well. One of the big things that I do is in Psalms 34:18, and it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Now, no one in pain feels like God is close. If anything, they think maybe he's punishing them. Maybe they're thinking, well, why are you doing this to me? But I've realized something, that the last thing we want to reach for is him to be in our corner when we're in pain. But that word close, through examination and looking into the word, it means relationship. Why do we get stuck in pain? Because there's a breach of relationship, and God is relational. And this is why when we share with people, a burden shared is a burden halved. So when we realize that he's for us, he's not against us, he loves us, he cares about us, then it changes the narrative. It just brings down the walls, it builds the bridges. It's a sense of, you mean I can just come as I am? Yes, you can come as you are. He already knows all your warts and your flaws and your shortcomings. I mean, if he was put off, he wouldn't be so relentless in pursuing you. If he was put off by all your bad and your wrong and how ugly and, what you didn't do right, he's not like an earthly parent. He doesn't operate out of conditional love.
So good. So good, folks. So I think we should have a few stories, because I love to have my guests share stories. Anecdotal evidence is always key when it comes to sharing about what your area of expertise is. Now, I know you have come from a drug and alcohol background. You've had quite a bit to do with people who are coming out of drug and alcohol. Also, you've dealt with people who have been battling through sexual abuse. So why don't you share, obviously, without sharing any names and too much detail, but why don't you share a few of the stories of people that have come through to you who are battling with shame, who are battling with anxiety, some of the tools that you were able to give to them so that they were able to self-assure, put those emotions back in the seat, maybe the passenger seat, and drive through to a really fulfilling life?
Yeah, look, I think the main thing, especially with sexual abuse or anything beyond that, there seems to be a sense that people blame themselves. So if I wiped feces on someone, sorry to be graphic, but if I wiped it on someone, where did that come from? It came from me to you. But what happens is the smell of it, they actually own it as themselves. They feel smelly and they blame themselves, and they have this sense that I should have known better. No, what happened to you was completely wrong. That should have never have happened. So what I do is I help them understand it's not necessarily what happens to you, it's what you believe at that point. See, when you assume that it was your fault, when you assume that I must have done something wrong or why did this happen to me, we end up concluding, and that just means we've judged and decided something after carefully thinking about it. See, this is how belief systems form. So shame enters at that point. So here's a classic example, even just off the topic of the sexual stuff. I had a person that was dear to me, and I was in the room. Actually, I'm just going to say it for what it is because I think they wouldn't have a problem with me. But it was my mum. And she's always wondered why grandma seems to spend more time with the other siblings. And so this has gotten under her skin. So she pulls me in the room and says, I want some answers. While you're here, Mark, I want to have a chat about why I feel that mum loves me more than the other siblings. And my nana goes, what are you talking about? I've never loved you less than the other children. She goes, well, I feel this way. You always show them time. She said, it wasn't that I loved them more. They just needed me more than you. See, they were struggling more. Mum was more self-sufficient. So here's mum. She's assumed that she's loved less because the attention wasn't given to her. But in my nana's mind, she didn't love her less. She actually needed to be with the other children so that they wouldn't damage themselves more. So it's amazing how we come to these conclusions. Like I hear it so often. People assume things all the time. Well, my dad didn't love me. And I go, well, hang on a second. You said your dad was in the business. You said that he put food on the table. You always had a beautiful bed to sleep in. You lived in a good neighborhood. Yeah, but I didn't feel loved. See, it's not that your dad didn't love you. It's just that he didn't meet you at the same spot where you needed love. For example, if you needed quality time and your dad thought putting food on the table and working after hours was to provide for you and love you, see, in his mind, he thinks he's actually loved you. But in your heart, I don't feel loved because dad didn't spend time with me. So this is what happens in the human heart. We assume these things. Here's another scenario. I get pulled into this meeting and this young guy goes, mate, I need you to come and talk with me and my father. I've had an issue. We're at heads. We're never at peace with each other. Now, these are quite prosperous people. These are not people in the gutter and broken, busted, disgusted. These are people of high caliber that, they're quite sufficient at what they do. So I go into this meeting thinking, okay, well, his dad's to blame. So they begin to talk and he brings up a story when he was a kid playing a game of cricket. And he goes, Dad, you remember that time we played a game of cricket and you made that comment about me? And he goes, yeah. And I was just joking. He goes, well, I took that to heart and I took that personally that you don't love me. And the dad just sits there with his jaw dropping going, are you for real? I didn't mean what I said in that way. I was just making a comment, but you've taken offense and you felt unloved for all these years. And see, the other brother was the golden boy. See how all the perceptions of reality and the family dynamics changed. He always thought dad was against him. He always lifted up his brother. He was the golden boy. And so just because of that one assumption, there was absolute tension and chaos in that family, just from that one situation.
Wow. Do you often have clients come through and after they've unpacked things, you realize that there has been a major assumption made and that solves a whole bunch of stuff, like a domino effect?
Yeah, well, here's one person in particular being brought up in a pretty dysfunctional family. Not dysfunctional. We always think dysfunctional is someone that's just really down and out. But see, look, Jeff Van Vonderen says that we've all got some form of dysfunction, but where we're stuck is where we're dysfunctional. So this person's stuck. They've got shame issues. They've been embarrassed over the years. Now, we're talking about a 65-year-old lady. So anyway, she's on this call with me and she goes, I haven't felt like I've been enough for like all my life. I felt like I've fasted, I've prayed, I've been to church, I've read the Bible, I've people, lay hands on me and deliver me and all this sort of stuff. And she goes, but you told me today that that feeling of not being enough is an actual belief. And she said, for the first time, I've actually seen this thing for what it really is. And since you told me that I could confront it, see, we traced the lie. We ended up facing it and then replacing it with the truth that she is enough, that she is loved, that she is wanted, that people do care about her. And I kid you not, after 50 years of this gnawing feeling of not being enough, literally disappeared overnight. And she began to get her motivation back, her enthusiasm. She felt better in her own skin. She was connecting better with other people just from that one thing.
Wow. And so you obviously see clients from all walks of life, people from what we would consider to be highly dysfunctional, even though Mark has just said that dysfunction is often a coined phrase. It's not entirely correct in how it's being used, right the way through to people who seemingly on the surface are really quite successful, but there's a gnawing sense of inadequacy and just not being enough underneath that. So
Yes.
I know that you're very, very passionate about helping people, and so I've asked Mark what he would be able to give to people as a download today, so that you folks can start to get some tools, get some assurance, and then if you're ready to take the next step, you can certainly reach out to one of Mark's conferences. He does have limited availability for one-on-one clients, but he does do quite a few conferences. So, Mark, what have you got for our watchers, our listeners today? To help them get past that shame, get past that anxiety? What type of downloads do you have?
Yeah, well, shame. It's the thief of intimacy. Do you know shame blocks you from intimately connecting with people? Shame makes you hide. So I believe shame is one of the big ones on the hit list when it comes to helping people come into a point of freedom into their life. So definitely, I'd love to give you some material on shame, and so that you can at least have a look at that and identify, wow, I've actually got that. I didn't realize this, and actually look at it from a different perspective. So I hope that helps.
Because identifying is often the key to getting in the door of if the safe is locked and you can't get inside, but identifying it is unlocking it so you can go inside and actually have a look around. Do you have any further, just before we go, just a few more stories about some success that you've had with clients that maybe they really felt like they were ready to drive off an actual cliff, not just a proverbial one? How can you share that in a way that will bring people hope that are watching this today, that if they are willing to just identify things, open the door, take a look at what is really messy and they don't want to, but get to the other side and it's so worth it? So share a few more stories with us about clients that you've gone through, either in a group or in a one-on-one setting.
Yeah, well, I remember a particular story of a young lady she was raped. I know it's a pretty serious topic, but I just want to say something about this. She took on board that she was worthless, and she ended up having a job, and then she ended up prostituting herself on the side. And her boss found out about it and publicly shamed her. After that point, she went into full-blown prostitution. She just rid herself off completely. Well, the good part is that we got down to the basement. I love that concept. It's the basement of your spirit, of your heart. And we unpacked some stuff about what she assumed herself to be. And after unpacking that of the things she believed, she is now enrolling to do counseling, actually to be a certified counselor. She's actually gotten her life back. Addiction has fallen off. She hasn't been back to addiction for the last 2 years. And she's walked away from that lifestyle completely. And now she's being a functional mother, and she's got her life back. She's got the reins of her life back. And this is what I wanted to say just before you asked the question. A problem defined is a problem half resolved. Half the problem is we don't know what the problem is. So this is what we do. We get to the problem so we can work through it more effectively. So is there any other stories? Yeah, look, there's ones where you look at people that there's one person in particular, and I don't want to go into too many details, but they had everything at their fingertips. They had everything in the world that a person would want. They had more certificates than probably any other person, distinctions, high level functioning person. But right at the core, right down in the basement, was this feeling of being dirty. Now, you would never suspect, you would never know that this person was abused as a child. On the surface, almost perfect, almost everything, all the ducks in a row, all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted. And you would never, even mannerisms, polite, respectful, and you just wouldn't know that that was happening. So getting down to that stuff, this person has really realized that that was shame. That
Wow.
dirty feeling was shame. And so after going through the shame stuff, he's realized that, hang on, this is a fabricated identity. This is not really who I am. It's in me, but it's not of me. See, shame makes you feel that it's you, but it's actually not. It's what's happened to you. And so to see this man find freedom after all those years is absolutely phenomenal.
Mm.
Absolutely phenomenal. And
Wow.
also, here's another one. Here's another one, and I know it seems to be down the route of sexual stuff, but it seems to be there's a guy. Okay, men in general they struggle, with pornography and all that sort of stuff, right? But it was more to the point. Get this: we think it's pornography is the problem. It's not. It's the symptom. Now, what happened with this particular person is they had no emotional bonding with their father.
Mm.
They had no emotional bonding nurture from their mother. So what happened is they also had this legalistic parenting. It was all rules, do's, don'ts. It was all about, don't bring shame to us. So what ended up happening is the desire for love was so strong. The desire for affirmation and nurture was so strong that they ended up going down the route of sexual addiction. So, my point in saying that is not the sexual addiction. It just shows you that the heart has needs. And so, when there's no nurture and affirmation, when there's no reassurance, people are going to long for something that they've never had. So people ask me, why do I keep doing what I'm doing when I know that it's wrong? Because there's unmet needs, there's unmet desires, there's a bonding disruption. Okay, so when bonding is disrupted, this is how we end up with people being stoic. Well, why do I feel emotionless? Because you've shut off your emotions. You've put the walls up. The trust has been broken. And so when I deal with that stuff, and so that is another testimony of someone that has found their freedom. There was another particular person who they always felt like something was off. They couldn't quite put their finger on it. And going through one of the courses, they realized once again that whatever they'd done, however they performed, they never felt satisfied. And so once I addressed what assumption that person made, literally the weight lifted instantly off. So that's the power of dealing with this stuff. Yeah, so there's one story in particular that really blew my mind apart. A lady had OCD for around 50 years. She had tried to get help in so many different ways, but I used the living wisdom counseling technique, which I was taught. So I said to this person, I said, look, you're going to have to, number one, resist the ritual. Number two, tolerate the anxiety. And number three, get to the chief thief beneath. Get to the belief that's driving the OCD. Anyway, the person went back, applied it in their life, and after 50 years, she stopped her OCD. So here's another one. I'll finish with this. Anxiety. I know a person that pretty much would go as stiff as a board in public settings. They would jam up, and they would even their throat would block up. So through counseling, I asked them the question, where have you ever been humiliated in public? Has anyone shamed you? Has anyone embarrassed you? And getting down to it, what happened is they were publicly shamed by their father. And it was so overwhelming that anything to do with a public place spelt danger. Now, another event took place. They were in a public place. It was a shopping centre, and their friends begin to yell out and heap abuse on this person, which was publicly shaming. It embarrassed them. So only recently, through identifying the danger, the alert, remember the sympathetic nervous system, danger, alert, and watch out and keep an eye out for myself, because they'd have overwhelming attacks of anxiety. Only recently, for the first time, they went out in public and they interacted with other people, and they actually enjoyed themselves because we were able to actually attack the issue. So it was never about public places. It was never about people. It was about the danger. And so once we address that and put some things in place, the person has found their freedom again. I hope that's sufficient for what you're asking.
So good, folks. I know that this is just a taste of, it's a big, big iceberg. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny top of the iceberg. I think we probably need to get Mark back. I'm actually very curious to talk about pornography because I do know that it totally kills intimacy in relationships. The girl feels like she can't, compete with that. She's got to do things that my body doesn't bend in that way and all these other things. And the man feels like he's not enough. And then, it's just such an issue. So we might get Mark back to talk about that. But folks, do go along, get your free download, sign up to Mark's mailing list so that you can find out where the conferences are on next. You might also be able to get some one-on-one counselling with Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure, Mark. I would dearly love to get you back again because I know that there's so many different topics that really affect us as a community, as a family unit, and how can we go and have a flourishing, prospering nation if we've got major issues in our personal and our family of origin settings. So thank you once again, Mark. Absolute pleasure having you. Look forward to having you again. Folks, if you have an exciting community or business-related story that you'd love to share with our community, do reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to introduce you to our community. It's around 120,000 and growing. Thank you very, very much for joining us today on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Once again, you're awesome. Have a great day. Chat soon and God bless.
Have you got a great business or community initiative you'd like to share with our podcast audience? We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us today at fairbusinessaustralia.com.au.